Thank you all for joining us today. If you've visited or watched any of the other ClearCom sessions that we've done, this will be kind of in a similar format. So we're kind of break it down a little closer today on the LQ box and specifically the Agent IC mobile app. So we're going to look at the different applications that these products cover and just how they all connect together. It's a very flexible system, and um, as I was putting this presentation together, I kept thinking of, or we could do this, or we could do this. There's hundreds of different possibilities. So you'll have to use your imagination a little bit on some of them, but you'll definitely get the idea. So I'm going to just switch over to the presentation here, and should be good to go. So as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at ClearComm's mostly focusing on the app itself, but also on the hardware and everything that's required to run it. So Agent IC is kind of the byproduct, but we take advantage of using the LQ and in some cases the Matrix hardware to host these instances and give us the connectivity that we're looking for. If you do want to download this, this is going to be as interactive as I can possibly make it. So, if you have a phone or a tablet handy, you can go to the App Store or Google Play, and you can download the Agent IC app. There's no charge for it, and we've actually got two LQ boxes on site here at the office, and we've opened up one of them to the outside world. So if you want to grab these credentials here, you can log in directly. So this 50.115.181 is our address. This is the port, and I'll give you and if you do that, you should be able to log in directly to our machine here and see the same stuff that we have on this guy right here. So we've got this guy logged in as Bob, even though Bob is here, he's in the other room. So in this particular case, we've set up a bunch of different users: Pete, Jeff, Bob, Celine, Bill, Shelley, and the password's just 6999. So feel free if you want, and if you've forgotten what the numbers are, just let me know, and I'll happily share them. So originally, the LQ box was intended to be a point-to-point link between multiple sites. So in its earliest form in the early to mid 2000s, this box came out to link multiple sites together. And it also allowed the ability to do, wasn't just a point-to-point link like a lot of things are, but it allowed you to do multiple points. So we could bridge up to 5 different sites together and share the same channels of audio. So if you had a church and you had a remote facility that wanted to share it, you could easily do that, but you could also incorporate a second or a third or a fourth site and take advantage of the same audio. They came out originally with 2 and 4 wire devices. So we had our standard 2-wire party line style systems and 4-wire devices just for line level audio or things like that. This is an example of one of the 2-wire guys. So we have LAN connection, PoE powered, separate LAN switch output. In this case, this is the 2W2 model, so it has 2 of the 2-wire jacks on the back. But they also enabled the ability for us to do things like integrate two-way radio. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, where we can actually tie these in and use the data functionality on the LQ box to do the call signaling and things like that. They also more recently added the ability for the LQ box to be a SIP gateway. So this allows you to assign up to 8 different extensions to the LQ box, and you can discretely decide what you want to do with each one of those extensions, or they could be direct phone numbers to the outside world if you have a connection to a provider directly. And then for most of our interest and what we've had the most fun with is Agent IC. So we can then enable up to 8 Agent IC users per interface by user. It doesn't have to be all 8. What's allowed this to work for us is ClearComm has done a really good job with their IP technology, something we call IV Core, and it's a kind of a leading edge protocol, but it was developed quite some time ago. And I mean that in a good way, in the sense that, the idea was to link panels and devices back to a frame or a matrix or sites, but using less than ideal links. So, the early renditions of this technology were almost 15 years ago, and our internet speeds have gone up, I don't know how many hundreds of times in that period of time. So they developed this technology to withstand poor connections and slow link speeds and high latency and all that good stuff. So that's nothing but a bonus for us in terms of the kind of media that we can expand onto these days. And of course, as new codecs have come out, they've adopted things like using some of the G722 wideband stuff, and also the newest Opus codec in bandwidths up to 20 kilohertz as well. So definitely been adapted. And this technology was kind of rolled into part of our new card scheme of stuff based on AES-67 and SMPTE 2110. So that we could share compatibility with networks and switches, and also, ensure real-time connectivity. So as far as what these boxes look like, there's about, I think, 9 different varieties of these guys. There's 3 in the small form factor, which is about a third of a rack space. The first one that we look at is the LQ2W2. So that's 2 channels of our old 2-wire party line system. But one of the most unique parts of this particular box is that it offers power for up to 8 to 10 belt packs. So you can tag a bunch of Clearcom wired belt packs right off the back of this, and don't need any additional power supply or power. Obviously, all the units are PoE powered, and there is a second LAN jack that we can use. I'm actually tethering my laptop through an LQ box for this presentation today. So the second one is kind of the same thing, but it's the 4W2, so that's 2 channels of 4-wire, basically line level audio. But this is line level audio, but it does include data as well. So on those 4-wire ports, there's full data connectivity. So these can be used with our matrix frames that we're going to talk a little bit about later, for connecting panels out over the internet or things like that. And then kind of a newer version of the 4-wire module, but as you'll see with different connectors, this is the 4WG2 model. This is 2 channels of 4-wire on a DB9, but what they've done is they've set the data, they've basically replaced the data connectivity with logic ins and outs. So this allows us to take advantage of the PTT circuitry in the wireless radios so that we can bridge onto a radio network for up to two different channels. So in addition to linking sites together or having agent IC on board, you can tie into a walkie-talkie style of system. So these are the 3 different flavors and kind of I/O options, and then we have basically different scalable versions of this one. So this is a 4-channel 4-wire, 4-channel 2-wire box. This guy is just an 8-channel 4-wire interface. This guy's a combo unit, which is one of the more popular ones for us, where it's 4 channels of 2-wire and 4 channels of 4-wire. So it's a split in half unit, 4 and 4. This guy is in the same flavor of the radio interface. It's 8 channels of 4-wire, but with the logic I/O as well. And the last one is a combo unit where it's 4 channels of 2-wire and 4 channels of the 4-wire radio as well. So this box and this box have definitely been popular for us. They're nice gateway boxes to drop down at a remote site and have a lot of connectivity. So in the earliest forms, as I mentioned, the LQ boxes were ideally meant to link sites together. So, in a simple setup, we would have a party line system, a 2-wire LQ box linked over the internet, and then potentially one or multiple, of these units, another LQ2W2, and then more Clearcom stuff on the other side. As we get into larger things, obviously we can do larger channel count kind of things, but the nice thing is it doesn't really matter what's on the other side. So we've got a 2-wire box here, but then we've got a 4-wire box on the other side. So it obviously does that media conversion for us in between. And then we get into other scenarios as well, where in this case We've got a 2-wire system on one side, and then we're using the G2 unit to do radio integration at the far end. And then finally, in a bit more of a complex setup, we can have one of our matrix systems on the one side, and at the far end, we use our LQ boxes as those remote destinations. So if you were part of the Edge presentation we did a few weeks ago, we talked quite a bit about these possibilities here. So so Agent IC. Agent IC is a soft app that ClearComm has provided. It's Android and iOS compatible, so you can go to the App Store, Google Play, and just download it for free. It works pretty much on any of those devices. You can go out and buy an Amazon Fire tablet for $65 or whatever it happens to be, and you can use this as an endpoint. Basically, we can program up to 24 keys on each of these devices, no matter whether it's a tablet or an actual phone itself. And most recently, this actually isn't even public just yet. It's just coming out as we speak. Something called Station IC. And Station IC is an extension of Agent IC that allows us to run this as a desktop application on a PC or a Mac. So we have the same 24 programmable keys. We actually do have some pages in this system as well. So we can actually set up desktop locations and run them that way. Any questions so far? Is that all making sense? I'll take that silence as a good thing. So we're going to run through a couple of different scenarios here. And I want to take this moment to mention that we do have a couple of gentlemen on the call. Andrew Bernacki from Bespoke. One of these scenarios is actually of his setup. So I'm going to pass it over to him for a minute and have him explain kind of what they're doing and how they're using the LQ boxes in some of their remote applications. So in a simple setup, we can have an LQ box tied into to a network or the internet. We can obviously tie in a second LQ box, and that box can physically be at the same site. I mean, we've had situations where people have, in order to avoid running long lengths of 3-pin XLR or or multiple channels of that between 2-wire systems in buildings, we've had a few situations where people have put an LQ box in one area, and then in a theater, for example, in one space, and then they drop another LQ box in the other theater, and then it just becomes a Cat5 network jack between the two locations, and not hundreds and hundreds or thousands of feet of XLR. But obviously, we can also run that LQ box out over the internet as well too, if made available. Moving away from that, obviously we can have an LQ box, and using the LQ box, we can actually link in our Agent IC mobile app, which we'll have a look at the programming here shortly. But the cool thing with that, and if we equip ourselves with one of our 2-wire modules, we can actually daisy chain wired belt packs off the back. So that becomes a unique way to kind of bridge between two forms of systems. So we can either bridge onto an existing party line system and add the Agent IC, or we can kind of go the other way, where we create a small Agent IC based wireless intercom, and we bridge into the wired world as well. But on this same vein, we can obviously make those Agent IC users available out over the internet. So they can always be local, just a local Wi-Fi connection, but they can also be done, out over the web as well. And one of my most favorites is literally doing everything. So we can have LQ boxes linked together. We can have Agent IC tying into the LQ box. We can obviously add those wired positions in as well. We can add another site remotely out over the internet. That site then can host some Agent IC spaces. And we can take it a step further, and we could add a SIP phone link into the system, where we could provide capability for reporters or people out in the field to dial into a phone number that's pre-generated or an extension on a larger system, and get dropped into any of the channels that are available on the LQ box itself. So one LQ box can do all of these functions. We don't need multiples, but one LQ box can host the Agent IC, can host the SIP connectivity for phone integration, and of course can then also function in its intended original purpose of linking this site and potentially this site together. So they're fairly powerful systems, and something like this almost forms the basis of a mini matrix intercom system where these devices provide up to 12 channels of intercom, and you can decide how those get distributed and used at these different locations. One of the most recent ones, and you may recognize this from an article that we recently posted, but we've got a cinematographer in the Toronto area who kind of adopted the LQ box and Agent IC as a way to do wireless intercom. And I've always been a strong proponent of this in the past, but with COVID happening and everybody needing to communicate in different ways, this has provided itself to be a really interesting scenario. So what he's done is he's purchased an LQ box and he actually keeps it in his basement. That's connected out to the internet. And then they shoot commercials. So they go on site, and his director, producer, and his cameraman, they actually have 8, but I didn't recognize them all here. They all connect over the local building Wi-Fi or cellular, depending on the venue, back to the LQ box. And these guys are working in close proximity. They're on set all day long, and this communication path is flawless for them. They're actually using it for they're actually using Bluetooth headsets connected into their phones and tablets to do that part as well. So what is this for everybody? I mean, it's a really cheap wireless intercom system at the very least. I mean, it's not as mission critical as a DX or a FreeSpeak system, but with that IVC technology that they built in, there's quite a few safeguards. There's quite resilience built into the actual signaling and the capability of the system, so that even these guys working 8 feet apart are communicating out over the internet and then back again. It actually works incredibly well with latency, not much more than about 100 milliseconds, and that's pretty surprising.
Jeff?
Yep.
Brent has a question. Good one.
Sure.
With all the IP, Wi-Fi, 4-wire, 2-wire, what are we looking at for latency from one area to another?
It depends on the boxes that you're using. So Agent IC has its own latency, but the LQ boxes can be done differently. So we'll have a look in the software because there's a couple of different buffer settings that you can do. But we're seeing on average between 80 to 120 milliseconds between multiple sites. It depends on if you're using cellular networks as well too, and how many hops there are between. But I haven't seen in a worst case thing, even using a 3G and a 4G internet option, I haven't seen more than 150 milliseconds from one side to the other, and that was a pretty poor. It was actually a 3G connection. I did this a number of years ago, but it was actually not much more than 150 milliseconds, and we did some tests using our audio precision to check actually what it was and get a very firm number. So hopefully that helps. Let me know if you see those questions because I can't see them myself. So so this example, I'll let Andrew explain, but this is kind of the bespoke setup that they have in Toronto. And on this call, we actually have a unique situation where they're linking a couple of different sites together over the internet as well. So maybe you can explain a little bit, Andrew.
Sure. So we got involved with LQs initially in pre-COVID, where we were going to leverage LQs to basically change our connections between like a front of house and a back of house scenario. So rather than running XLRs, we would run a network line because we already had network infrastructure between a front of house position and a back of house position. So we bought some LQs to eliminate that copper run of XLR. And as we've transitioned into sort of the COVID era, we've integrated our matrix into our system now, and we have 12 control rooms, all with panels in them, which are all connected over AES 67. And then that all comes back to the matrix, and then we can integrate from there. So what we've been doing a lot of is integrating our production managers, who often act like show callers. We integrate them remotely, so we're trying to minimize the amount of people in the building. So what we'll do is we'll give them an Agent IC license, and then they connect to either a Zoom presenter call, or we'll give them an SRT video stream, and then they have Agent IC and able to talk to that control room crew and basically call their show remotely. And with the way we have everything integrated, they can talk to that presenter call privately, so not going out to that public broadcast, or they could do a stage announce sort of scenario talking into that call if there happen to be any issues that they need to make the public aware of. Another scenario that we do a lot of, in actual fact, we're doing it right now with Paulo, who's on this call. We have a control room running a show, and then we have a remote site downtown in an office block where one of the remote presenters wanted essentially field production. So we've brought in a camera and a small crew there to be able to capture them, and we want to integrate those two sites together. So we've sent them two wired intercom, and we've sent them an LQ, and that LQ is now connecting back to our matrix here in Toronto at our office, and then connecting to that control room here, so that they can coordinate between those two sites.
That's very cool. And how do you find the latency in the workflow? Is it working for you guys well?
Absolutely. I mean, it's on par with anything in like a video conference solution. So I actually have the spec sheet up from ClearCom right now, and they spec anywhere in various different scenarios, network dependent, obviously, but anywhere between like 80 milliseconds, and I think their worst measurement was around 455 milliseconds. But that's vaguely on par with what we've seen with like a Zoom round trip time or a Teams or anything like that. So it's absolutely manageable to unnoticeable.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen links to just between LQ boxes, which would be the quickest in a local site. I've seen links, down around the 50, 60 millisecond range. So between, this box and this box, with the latency opened up and the buffers, pretty much non-existent, you can get very quick turnaround, which is quite good. I mean, the fastest I've seen on any kind of IP, something like this that is capable of going out over the internet was just a little over 40 milliseconds. So we're doing quite well with that. So definitely. I see you've got a helper in the background there too, Andrew.
Yeah, Chris just wandered through and dropped off his dog, our office dog, Riley.
Right on. Very cool. So I'm just going to jump back here. So I'm gonna flip over and have a look at the programming as well. But before I do that, I just want to have a quick look at a lot of times there's a fair bit of concern and uncertainty on getting Agent IC and some of this stuff working inside a building is easy. Obviously, there's not much required in terms of firewalls and port forwarding, but we get a lot of questions about using it out over the internet again. And I want to bring this up because it's a fairly important thing to mention. Is that depending on what you're doing, we'll need no more than 3 ports made available to the outside world for connectivity. And this is only on the host side. Obviously, the outgoing traffic is typically handled differently from many different perspectives. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's heavily blocked. But a lot of times, what we've found is that opening up these ports, making them available to the outside world from the host end, something we call the link master, means that you can walk around with an LQ box or Agent IC on a phone or a device, and it will connect in, with no issue that way. That's not everywhere, of course, but that's a good, in a lot of cases you can get away with that. Now, it is important to mention that depending on the setup that you have, these are the ports that we look for on the incoming side, but that doesn't mean that that's what needs to be opened on the outside world connectivity. Like port 80 is a very common web port, might be used internally in a location. So we could redirect from a more public port to this, or same with these guys. If you're just using Agent IC, the only thing that we need is port 6001. So you don't need to worry about these other two ports here. These two ports are really just required for linking LQ boxes to each other. If you're doing linking between sites and Agent IC, you'll need to do all three, of course. And again, they can be different numbers that get redirected to these at the local level as well. So I'm going to flip over to this this screen here. You guys see that okay? Web page. So these LQ boxes are network derived. Obviously, I'm just going to flip over to this guy here. On the front of these guys here, you'll notice there's a small screen, and this particular guy shows up as a 4WG2. So this is one that actually has the radio integration on the back. So it's got those two DB9 connections there, and PoE powered today. But you'll notice that when it plugs in by default, it's picking up an address for me. So these are DHCP devices rated out of the box. So this guy's getting 10.0.40.108. And then the other box here that I have is the same thing. It's actually, they've just symmetrically picked 107 and 108 for the addresses. So if I navigate to those websites, we get left with a. I'm just actually going to log out here, do something real quick, and let's have a quick look here. Oops. I'm just going to start a fresh page for you guys so that it's a little easier to see what you see. So normally, by jumping to these sites, you'll get left with a username and a password. So I'm going to log in as just admin and admin by default. And what you'll see in these cases is I have my LQ box here, the 107 box, the first one. And then I've also identified this other box. This guy has been previously set up and is working in tandem, but you'll see any close devices and linked devices in this setup. So as I mentioned, we can link up to 6 devices together, 1 link master and 5 extra boxes between them. And so this is an overview page that just kind of gives you a quick glance at the whole system. So I can see quickly what I/O I've got. So this box is a 4-wire device. This one is a 4-wire G device. So our radio integration, I can see that it's PoE powered, and I can go through all of this that way. If I click on the device tab, I can go into the actual device itself. And I've got a drop down here to show me the 2 possible devices and everything that's related to it. So I can throw a name on this device so that it makes a lot more sense for us looking at it in the overall scheme with more than one. I can throw a host name on this if I'm going to give it a DNS based address, and I can see the actual hardware and firmware version as well. So we can change our passwords here because admin is obviously not a very secure one. And under the license tab, this is where we give the ability for this device to do more than just linking together. So stock LQ boxes will, out of the box, link together, no problem. If we want to do the SIP connectivity, we would add the SIP accounts. And if we want to do Agent IC, we would add those as well. And each box will allow you to do up to 8 of each license in singles as well. So this particular box, as you can see, is licensed for 8 Agent IC and 8 SIP accounts as well. So I can do both. I've got full connectivity with this guy. Under the upgrade section, we can upgrade if we have upgrades from ClearCom. It's very simple, web-based. Grab the file from the computer and go. And from here, I can set the box back to default, restart it, grab support info, and I can sync the time on the system itself. So just some basic administration stuff. Under the network tab here, this is where we set up our local network connectivity and a bit of the wide area stuff if you're going to go that way. So I have the ability to set this as a static or a DHCP device. And then this is what's most of interest here is the external connectivity. So the external IP address, the outward facing address of the building here is this 50.115.181. And then domain, I'm not using one for this setup, so haven't put that in. And then the external port that we're going to look for on the outside. These aren't as critical as as getting this set up right, but it is important to let the box know what address it's going to be looking for on the outside. And then over the years, they've added a fair bit of security as well. We're connected with just a straight HTTP connection, but we can force the device to connect through HTTPS, and we can actually generate a certificate, or we can upload our own certificate for use based on a specific domain and all that kind of stuff. So by default, it will utilize its own self-generated ClearCom-based certificate for connectivity, but we have the ability to upload our own units that way as well. We can do the private and the full chain. So in my case, like I said, everything is DHCP based, just with some local connectivity, so I'm good. And because I've set this up here and I've port forwarded port 6001 to the outside world, that will allow me to connect externally, and you guys as well too, if you want to try connecting into the LQ box. If you do have luck at that, you should see something similar to this here. I'm logged in as Bob, as you can see, but you should get exactly the same identification when you get going there. Under the linking section here, this is where we set up the linking between the LQ boxes. So in any system, we have to have at least one link master. So that's where everything goes. Everything kind of points back towards. So in this case, this first box is my link master, and I can see that with the orange indication here in the top left. And then I've got this set up for more of a wide area connection. So this gives me a couple of drop-down boxes, and this is related to buffering and latency setup, basically at an overall level, knowing, are these going to be just local to a local area network where we're not really concerned with bandwidth, or are we doing this out over the internet and we need to be, we need to have a little bit of buffering there, so we can make those adjustments. And then down below here, I can see the actual other devices. So I have my link member. I have 5 other link members, and I have this guy here. As you can see, it's highlighted with a ring around it. That's identifying that the secondary box is set up as the number 2 guy. So nothing much more to do at this point, but you get to see that right there. Then this box is a 4-wire box. So under the port setup, this gives us access to the actual physical connectivity of this interface. So you can see I've got 4-wire port A and B here, and then I've got some port settings as well. So we can label these ports. We can adjust the gain of the ports. There's a built-in Vox as well. That's a voice-operated switch that allows us to set a low-level threshold. And the ability to gate out anything below that, and basically also trigger events if we pass over a threshold. So that can be useful for doing the walkie-talkie tie-in and things like that. And then one unique thing we have as well down below is we've got a port function and a connectivity speed. So as I mentioned, these 4-wire modules can be used for integrating some of our older matrix panels out over the internet. So we have a port function here that allows us to basically change the direction of the audio and the data flow on the port. So sometimes these get located at the matrix end, in which case they need a certain orientation in those pairs. And sometimes they're located at the panel side, so they need the reverse of that setup. And then as well, we have a connection speed if you're using different legacy versions of ClearComm. So most commonly is the Eclipse setting here, 192K. But sometimes we have had people link in some of the older Drake panels, and that requires 9600. So that's it for this main setup here. And then we get into some other things as well. So I'm going to go through these kind of all together here. Assignments and accounts kind of is the first one that's of interest here. So since we've licensed this box with Agent IC, we have the ability then to create Agent IC users here. So as you can see, I've pre-created these. This is the same picture I showed you earlier. And these are 8 users to match those 8 licenses that I have set up. And you can see that we have myself logged in, and I think we do have one person remotely connected, which is pretty cool. So that did work out. So we get a status indication when somebody is occupying that slot. So this is just the administration of, labeling the IDs and the passwords and all that kind of stuff. And from here, we can actually pick a role that we'll have a look at in a second here, and go through. So you can have it, I'll talk about roles in a second, but you can have it preset on one of those roles. As you can see, I got a whole bunch more people joining in here too, so that's great. And then because this interface is linking multiple LQ boxes together, and it's possible that those other LQ boxes also will have Agent IC licenses. You can decide which LQ box these are going to be assigned to. So as you can see, both of these actually do have Agent IC licenses on them. They're both set up to do 8 users each. So I could be assigning these users to one or the other LQ box this way. I hear somebody talking on there. Definitely got some people on. That's great. So this box also has the SIP integration as well. So we can set up different SIP servers here. There's no limit to the number of different SIP servers. And then within each of those servers themselves, they can then have accounts. So you could be linked to multiple different phone systems and multiple accounts within each of those phone systems. Can you guys hear me? Check 1 2, check 1 2. Just doing a shout out over the audio channel. So we have our IP to connect to the phone system here, our typical SIP port 5060, and a domain as well. So I don't have one of these set up today, but it's a very basic and easy setup for this kind of stuff. And then in a case like Andrew's setup at Bespoke, where they're linking the LQ boxes, we can then connect the LQ box to the IVC protocol, and that does a frame connection from this LQ box back to a frame itself. So obviously, we're focusing on doing LQ to LQ presentations and connections that way, but we can link it that way. So we can set up that server and a user ID and a password between those two. And then once we have the account set up, we can set up now roles for those users. So there's a default role set up with just a few buttons. I was playing around with this earlier, so you can see I've set up the 24 keys, but a whole bunch of them aren't assigned. But this is just an idea to show you that it's possible to actually set up 24 keys per role, which is kind of neat. But I can add a role here as well. I'm going to call this the video guy here, and I'm going to start it from a different one, and I'll add that in. And then once we do that, we can then decide what channels and things like that we want to show up on those key sets. And then we can also, at that point, then decide what do those buttons do for us. So they can be listen keys, events. They can be call buttons or a combination. So we have that ability to set those up. Now, before we go any further here, it's important to kind of understand the background audio and the things that are available to the system. The way this works is each of the LQ boxes, or the LQ box themselves, they have 12 channels of audio, and those show up down the side here. As you name them, obviously they change their order and change their contribution, but there's fundamentally 12 of those channels available. And those are the same channels that we program here through the key sets for the Agent IC. So we can see that I've labeled one as audio, I've labeled one as lighting, one as video, and so forth. And then from there, you can see that they show up. So in this case here, obviously the audio key is showing up on a couple of different roles, and they show up there as a listen from the system. But you can see this is just a big party line here, basically. Now, where the actual I/O comes into play is on the left side. You can see that I have my LQ box, my link master called Gear Audio, and I have my other secondary one, and each of these has 2 ports on them. So it's these 12 channels are basically just virtual pools of where people can go to have a conversation. But I can then link one of the actual physical ports into that pool to then kind of bridge that channel out to other media, and that could be 4-wire, 2-wire, walkie-talkie, and all that kind of stuff. So in this case, I've added the first 4-wire port to this audio channel. So if anybody talked on the audio, that would come out the back of this guy here on port number 1. I also have the ability to do things called directs here as well. So I can have, instead of, these are fundamentally, party lines. So if I talk to audio and somebody's listening to audio, or multiple people are listening to audio, we're all going to talk and we're all going to listen kind of on the same channel itself. But sometimes you want to have a more direct path. And this is where I can make assignments and I can do direct linking between ports. So I could add the B port of this unit to the B port of this unit, and this creates a direct path between these ports and doesn't occupy any channels or doesn't do anything that way. So there's different layers of things that you can do between the devices themselves, and all that stuff. So on the roles section here, as you can see, these guys are programmed up to channel 12 here. Channel 13 is unassigned, and by doing this, I can grab other channels and things like that. But as you can see, I don't have anything else available because I've used all 12 channels, in this setup. One thing I will mention here as well is that once you do add these physical ports and this connectivity here, you'll notice that there's some additional metrics showing here. This is kind of green half circle thing. If you click on this, this shows you and gives you the ability to adjust the network quality of this, this interface itself. So we have the ability to do silent suppression on this channel. And then we also have the network quality selection here. So this relates to LQ linking, but it gives you a really good idea of the audio bandwidth, the kind of the buffering that's being used, and the kind of latencies that we're going to expect. And I have the ability to move that up and down depending on what's required. So on LQ links, I can do a full 20 kilohertz of audio at occupying 128 kilobits per second. And you can see the jitter and latency see metrics there. Or I can go right down to 16K, and obviously that bumps it up a little bit, adds a bit more buffering. So this is a handy thing, and is adjustable per link between LQ boxes. So that's the basic setup of these guys. We've kind of hit our 45 minutes plus a few. Does anybody have any specific questions from your side for me? Anything anybody wants to see? I'm happy to go on. I can go on all day on this. I think you must be all good there. I'm going to continue anyways. So one of the things I want to do here is I want to look at this other box now and have a quick look at the linking section here on this other one. So we looked at the link master, but I want to have a look at this guy here and see how that works and how the connectivity is set up there. So on this guy, I have 8 Agent IC licenses, but no SIP licenses available. So that's fairly straightforward. And in this case here, because we're not the link master, we have a bit more connectivity options, and we see a few different options. So in this case, I'm set up as a link member, and I've set up the other box, the 107 box, as the local address to connect to, and this local port for discovery. And by doing that, or even by changing this to something different here, you'll see that it's when you do make these changes, it goes out and it looks and checks and things like that. But it gives you the identification that there's no other device out here. There's nothing going on. If I fix that again, put it back in, you can see that it comes up with a valid device, and it picks one of the IDs for me, and I can pick any one of these guys that I like as well too. So I'll move it to number 6 just because. And once you've done that, then you've created that link between the devices. So this will take a second to resync itself, and yeah, will show up good there now. One other thing to note too is that we can see some statistics on this page as well, kind of as a general overview. So I can see that there's a couple of people logged in right now. I got somebody logged in as Bill from the Android account. And I'm logged in here as Bob here. I'm this guy on my tablet, but there's also somebody else on Android that's logged in as the director. And I can see that it's on the first LQ box and not the second one. And then if I had any SIP connections or any IVC links to the matrix, those guys would also show up there. Now this box also, under the port setup, will have some extra options. So these are 4-wire ports plus GPIO, as you can see up top here. So we can just strip the audio out on the DB9, but we also have the GPIO connectivity so that we can integrate our radios. So there's a section right here where you can assign the triggers, and you can test them to make sure that the outgoing GPO connections are triggering the radio. So the idea is that when a talk button is pressed to a channel that has one of these ports assigned to it, that the GPO connection will be active. So a trigger will be made to queue up the push to talk circuit on the radio connection. So that setup is done here, and there's a bit of a delay as well, so that you can hold it and keep it active so that it doesn't trigger too quickly. So each of the boxes will have a slightly different combination of I/O statistics depending on what you've got plugged in. But what you'll notice is that regardless of which box you're looking at and the setup of those things, you can, once you have them linked, I can see that I'm on box 107, but because they're linked together, they very much show up as devices that are all together and all the same. And let's see if I can connect in here. Just for fun, I do have, not sure if this is going to work. I do have the Station IC app here, a demo version of it running on my computer. I just want to see if this was working earlier, so we'll see if it logs me in. Just try this. We can talk to SpaceX directly if we want to. That's pretty cool. I think somebody might be using it.
We have a question here, Jeff.
Yep.
In the meantime, Natalie asked, so with this, you could say have a stage manager speak to everyone, but also have various talk channels that only direct connect back to the stage manager. So there's less cross-talking, say for example, from backstage to stage manager, and the video op doesn't need to hear. Is that easy to change on the fly or during a show?
Absolutely, yeah. So, we'd likely set up multiple channels and program the roles separately for those things. So we give access to those that need it, and we could have separate talk around channels and directs available for those point-to-point links, so that you can keep that chatter down, which is kind of nice. So with the handy part is having those 12 intercom channels really gives you a lot of flexibility. So we might only be integrating 2 channels into the intercom system physically, but that means we have 10 other background channels that could be used between certain devices to communicate on and to segregate that communication. So it's almost like a mini matrix, because each one of these boxes gives you that those 12 discrete channels. Hopefully that helps a bit. I can see that everybody got logged in okay. I will just run through this interface real quick while we've got it set up. So as you can see, I've programmed a couple of channels here. And you'll notice that some of them are a little different. So this first guy here is the audio channel, and it's got a talk and a listen setup. So by pushing and sliding, sorry, this is backwards for me. If I slide towards the center, I can link that up, or I can just push and hold. And you'll notice that the video is programmed a bit different as well. Video has a talk button here, but this is set up as a listen directly, or sorry, a call button directly. So I can activate this call button by pushing that. And there's 3 little dots down below. So if I press those, let's see if I can do that. You get a volume control for your listen level for that source. And oops. So you can slide that volume, and these particular ports are set up with a kind of an auto listen. So as you talk, you will all automatically be listening, and that's why it's been configured with the call separately. So I can see somebody from lighting here is trying to call me, so I could talk back to the lighting channel if I wanted to, just by holding it. So this is kind of where the reply key shows up, and then somebody also talking and trying from the video section as well. So yeah, so that's how these guys are programmed up, but they can be individually done up as well. So we could have listens only to certain channels. We could have talks only, or these guys are combo buttons, and we would set that up by role in the LQ box setup, and mostly from this page here. So this is where we would make those adjustments and do that. So you can see this is where the primary is the call button here, and the right key is the talk key, and then there's the secondary keys, which are showing. Those are the secondary page. When you flip with the 3 dots, you see that these guys show up with those keys. So. That's it from my point of view. I mean, these guys are incredibly powerful, but very straightforward and easy to get up and running. If anybody does need a wireless intercom, it's worth having a look at this LQ with the Agent IC application, because it's something that, as I mentioned, we've tried a few times now, and it works quite well. And people are always concerned about resiliency and how well things work over wireless and Wi-Fi and stuff, but it's proven itself to be incredibly resilient to these kind of situations.